It's about that time. It's usually just before, just after the NCAA tournament kicks off every year. We shift our gaze to the NFL draft full time on the Athletic Football Show. And each year, I'm pretty open about the fact that I come a little bit later to this process than the people who are doing it every single day. And so many of the years where we've kicked off our draft coverage, we've started it with what we call an idiot's guide to the NFL draft. And every year, I am that idiot. And so that's what we're doing today. We're going to have our guys, Dane Brugler and Dave Helman from Building the Beast, here to help me learn a little bit more about the NFL draft before we dive full scale into it. Dane, it's good to be back with you, buddy.
I always really look forward to this pod because you bring a blank slate kind of perspective to this conversation, and that makes it really fun. It's a really crazy part of the calendar when we come to the draft, and with pro days and just trying to get everything in the right spot. Like it's a different type of March Madness. But so this is a really fresh perspective to come to this pod, kind of hitting the bare bones, the 30,000-foot view, however you want to phrase it. I always enjoy having this conversation.
My knowledge is mostly rooted in what I have learned listening to Building the Beast over the course of the year. Like that is the amount of draft coverage that I engage with during the course of the season. I don't watch much college football. Again, I'm very open about that. And so I'm aware of kind of what the contours of the class look like, but I'm sure there are plenty of people that if they don't listen to Building the Beast, which is a mistake, but you should, that are not full-time draft gurus or are not people that are thinking about the draft from the middle of last season. Unless you're like a Jets fan, you probably have not been looking at the draft prospects since December, all of you. So we're going to take today just to kind of give a broad overview about what this class looks like, feels like, some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses. And Dane, you had a couple, kind of like 5 or 6 broader points that you wanted to bring to this that we're going to run through. So let's just start with those. And this is one that has come up a lot as we were kind of figuring out what our draft coverage was going to look like over the next month. We were talking about this yesterday, Dave. Just this idea that this is one of those years where don't overthink it. Just take the best player that's there. It doesn't necessarily have to be at a premium position. It doesn't have to be somebody that would check every single box as a top 10 pick previously. Some of that, Dane, is driven by the talent that's available in this draft, but some of it is driven by where the best players are available in this draft and which positions they play.
Currently really fascinated by the life cycle of the NFL draft narrative, because we talk about the draft for so long, and it has become such an industry unto itself that you can be having these conversations like 12 months out of the year, and yet we as an NFL community still have collective amnesia where we can say, like, all through the fall, look, this is the state of the draft class. This is probably not going to be as good of a quarterback draft as we thought it was going to be. The star power in the top 10, 15 picks is not your ideal version of things. I mean, I can go find an episode of Building the Beast from October where Dane asked me what the top 10 would look like, and I just drew like a 20-second blank. Like I had no idea what to say. But here we are in mid-March, and everybody, if you're not following during football season, everybody's part of this now. Like everybody's doing draft content, everybody's watching tape and catching up, and all the same old adages and idioms are coming into play, and people are arguing about positional value and high-end production and traits, and we seem to have forgotten everything we said about this 6 months ago. And so I'm very interested by that, and I'm interested in trying to find common ground where it's like, hey, we have to work within the parameters of what this draft class is.
Not to get too far off the point, but it is always interesting to me how the draft narratives take shape, and it's hard to keep up with them. I'm not on Twitter all that much, but I did the other day tweet Denzel Boston, his pro day, and how good he looked. The 3-cone was outstanding. Wide receiver from Washington, Robert, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
yes.
We're getting there. The first round guys I'm familiar with. I did my homework before we started this show.
But I tweeted about his pro day, and apparently he's a faller. Like he's a mid-second rounder. Like it's hard to keep up with how just the general public and fans, what the draft narratives are. But I think, Robert, like you mentioned how just draft the good players. Like that's going to be the theme of this top 10. We can get so caught up in upside, chasing traits, really maximizing position value. And look, I get it. Position value matters, but I think it matters more so from um, contract standpoint, how the money works. We talked about this a lot with Brock Bowers, right? When he was coming out, one of the top 5 players in that draft. But if you draft him top 7, top 8, he's immediately a top 5 paid tight end in the league. And so is that the right way to allocate your resources? But for the most part, I'm okay with the term position value just going away. I want it to go away, and I want to replace it with impact value. To me, that is the right way to look at this conversation. Is it more important to focus on the position, or more important to focus on the impact? And so, and every team, every roster is at a different phase, a different part of their evolution. So it's different for everybody. One positional value is not the same for the next team. And so, the Titans, for example, at 4, they're looking at their roster, and their way of maxing out what they have is going to be different from another team. And so the impact value, to me, that matters more so than any focus we put on the positional value.
The only pushback I'd have on that is I do think that the impact can be directly correlated to the position in certain situations, right? Like Ashton Jeanty is the best example of this to me. Ashton Jeanty, there's a chance he's the right pick for the Raiders in a couple years, but because the offensive infrastructure around him wasn't built up enough to get the most out of a player like Ashton Jeanty, you're not going to be able to realize the full impact of what Ashton Jeanty could have been over the last couple years. And so I think that's some positions are more reliant on others than some positions are more reliant on the positions around them. Like that's just the reality of the situation. I think running back can be that. But overall, I think I think that's totally fair. I think I come back to 2 different points I want to hit with this. One, let's just talk about what this means in relation to the players that we're discussing, right? So Arvell Reese is at the top of your top 100. That's somebody to whom I don't think this really applies, right? That's somebody where there are a lot of traits there. He's going to give you pass rush juice. Like that's somebody that, independent of our concerns about positional value, is probably a worthwhile top player in any draft. And if he goes number 2, I don't think anybody would blink. After that, and even when the conversations you guys have had about like, is Sonny Styles legitimately the second best player in the draft? Should he go number 2 overall? Is Jeremiyah Love going to be a top 5 pick? And it seems like we're drifting further and further toward that. Caleb Downs is probably not somebody that would profile as a top 10 pick in a lot of other drafts, but in this one, Dane, he might be. And so I think those are the guys, that's kind of what I want to focus on first. Who are the guys we're talking about here, and why should they be exceptions to the way that we typically think about this stuff?
Yeah, and I think, you hit on, I think some of those key guys, the Ohio State guys, Sonny Styles at linebacker, Caleb Downs at safety. Caleb Downs is really probably the biggest wild card of the top 10, because you can make a case that he should go 2. You can make a case that maybe he should fall to 10 or beyond. Like it just, part of it is the position he plays. Part of it is he doesn't have these overwhelming physical traits. The size is average. The speed, the athleticism is good, but he didn't test at the combine, and I don't know if he'll test at the pro day. It's part of that. A lot of teams look at this and say, we're not comfortable drafting a safety in the top 10. That's just how several teams operate. But when you watch a tape, you see just this monster player who, part of it is how smart he is, and just the different ways that, he sees the field like a chessboard, and he's one step ahead of you at every turn. And he did this since his freshman year at Alabama, played for 3 different defensive coordinators this past year, Matt Patricia, defense coordinator, Ohio State. And all the different disguises and all the different ways they would use him, it unlocked everything for that defense. Ohio State had arguably the number 1 defense in all of college football this past year, and a big part of that. And look, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, like there are a lot of Ohio State defensive players that are going to be drafted top 50, top 60 in this draft, but Caleb Downs was the thing that unlocked all of that. And so I think every team in the top 10, top 12 would love to have Caleb Downs. Whether or not that's the right resource to take him top 10, that's more the discussion that they're having at this point.
just to play this out right now, a lot of the beats we're going to hit here are beats that we're going to explore further in like actual shows over the next month. Like you're going to hear echoes of this stuff for things that we're going to blow out. But the Caleb Downs thing specifically, I feel like when we're talking about players like this, it can be useful to just look at historical comps, because when you're making outlier decisions, what other outliers have there been and where can we kind of learn lessons from this thing? And the Caleb Downs thing is so interesting for me just from like, again, my very initial thoughts on this, because when you look at this idea of just take the good players independent of positional value, that can be a mixed bag, because I think we overrate our ability to understand who the good players are. That's the problem with some of that stuff, right? And so it can go either way. Like the most recent example of this is the draft where the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell and people were freaking the out. And then now a couple of years later, looks pretty good, right? Like those are good players. It's better to have good players. Quentin Nelson's a great example of this. Can you pick a guard with the 6th overall pick? You can if he's as good as Quentin Nelson. Like that's something you can easily do. But there are other examples of this on the other side. Like Devin Bush has resurrected his career, but Devin Bush was a top 10 pick at linebacker, and I think he was one of those guys where like that's just a good player. That did not work out for the Steelers, especially when you consider the trade up. Jeff Okudah, how many more guys in the last decade have we said, oh yeah, that guy's just good, like he's going to be in the league for 10 years than Jeff Okudah was? Kyle Pitts, being a top 5 pick, he's a player that's worth franchising for the Falcons, but if you go back and do that draft over again, he would not be taken. And the last guy I would throw out when I just think about the pre-draft narrative around him, 10-year starter, solid as can be, he's worth taking in the first round. That's what we said about Zion Johnson. That's exactly what the conversation was around Zion Johnson. And it's safety specifically.
This is a wet blanket. Jeez. Okay.
Well, I'm saying a lot of names of a lot of guys I really liked at the time.
But I think that's part of the problem with this type of thinking is that we think that, and Aaron Curry is the best example of this ever. We don't have to go back all the way. That's 15 years ago. That's the best example ever, where it's like, this is the safest player in the draft. He's a top 5 pick, and it was a no-go. With Caleb Downs specifically, what's interesting to me, because I think 2 other guys you'd throw in here, and this is an example on the other side where just take the good players independent of value. These guys fell too far. Derwin and Kyle Hamilton. Those were top 10 players in their drafts. They went outside of the top 12, and I think both of them, that there's been some regret in retrospect. But the difference to me, again, just first glance, Derwin and Kyle Hamilton are physical outliers at the position. So with Caleb Downs, Dane, it feels like you're going to be making a different sort of bet, even to some of these other super high-end safety prospects that we've seen over the last 10 years.
Yep, and that's fair. But I think you could also look at, if you look at Derwin James and Caleb Downs and you just watch their college tape and focus on them as prospects, you can come away saying Caleb Downs is a better prospect, even though he isn't the physical doesn't have some of the physical traits that Derwin brings to the table. And part of that is the mental part. Part of it is, Caleb Downs is an elite tackler. He can play close to line of scrimmage. Just the urgency, the intelligence, the toughness, all of that. It's like I said, every team is going to want a Caleb Downs. It's a matter of where do we feel comfortable drafting him? And part of it is, in some other drafts, they've been a little bit deeper, and especially in the top half, top 15, top 20. So instead of drafting our safety here, let's go chase this traitsy pass rusher or this offensive tackle that shows a lot of promise. This draft, it's a little, we don't have as many first round grades. It's not as deep in that top 10, top 15, not as many blue chippers. So I think more teams will be okay saying, you know what, like, yeah, Caleb Downs is maybe not a quote unquote elite physical prospect, but we feel good with him coming in, being a starter from day one, and upgrading the back end of our defense. And I think there's value in that. So I think the relationship to the overall class and just how it's not a top-heavy group, that will affect the decision-making about where to take these guys as much as anything.
The other thing I would mention, Robert, is just, and look, no player is bust-proof, right? I completely get that, and that's just baked into all of this. But this is a year where, like we said, you listed a few guys, but I have Dane's top 100 pulled up in front of me. I'm just looking through the top of it. Going down the list of the first 12 to 15 players, You can poke holes in pretty much every single prospect. I would say Fernando Mendoza, he's not a perfect quarterback prospect, but like he's more than good enough to be the top guy off the board. And then other than that, I would say Jeremiyah Love is the prospect with the least amount of questions or like the least amount of projection for me. And then everybody else between positional value and just holes in their game, there aren't that many sure bets. And so if this is a year where let's say like Caleb Downs doesn't live up to the hype, this is a year where I think you could be more comfortable making that bet than in other years, because I think you're making a pretty big gamble with a lot of these big time picks this year, which makes it scary but also fun.
You have to be okay with the double instead of we want to hit the home run, and that's as early as the top 7, top 5. Like, you have to be okay with hitting that double instead of saying this needs to be a true franchise changer for us.
I mean that applies to Fernando Mendoza, doesn't it?
To a degree, it does.
If Fernando Mendoza turns out to be the 12th best quarterback in the league, I think that's kind of the realistic projection for him. In my opinion, I don't know. Other people might feel differently, but I think that's like, people might balk at that when you say, "Oh, you can't take him number 1 if you only think he can be."
You absolutely can.
When you actually sit down and list the top 15 quarterbacks in the league, you're like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I think that it's somewhere between 10 and 13, I think, is a fair projection, realistic projection for where Mendoza, maybe his ceiling will be in this league.
You take that every single time, or else you don't have a good understanding of how hard this shit is. I mean, that would be phenomenal for Fernando Mendoza.
A big picture thing that we don't have to talk a ton about now, but I do want to explore it at some point because I think it's an interesting study. That idea of doubles, Dane. Mm-hmm. If you look back at history of the draft, is it more important to find elite players in the draft or to not miss in the draft?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think there's examples of both. Like, I don't think there's a hard, fast, this is the right way to think. Part of it depends on like where you are in your building your roster. Where can you afford to maybe, like the Rams sitting there with the 13th pick, they could afford to go make a splash if they really want to. Whereas, some of these other teams picking the top 10, hey, let's make sure we're getting a building block, a guy that might not be a true franchise changer, but he's a foundational piece for what we're trying to build here. So, yeah, I think that the answer to that is definitely a moving target based on the team.
I'll cheat with my answer and say, if you never miss, you will stumble into guys who are better than you thought they'd be.
Yes, I think that's right.
If you never miss, some of those guys will be elite, even if it's by pure luck.
I truly have no idea what the answer is. I just think it's a question worth exploring, and maybe we will at some point. All right, let's get to the next one here. Dane, this is the first time in a long time, in your opinion, that we have a class that is light at both quarterback and running back at the same time. We've had the quarterback conversation for a while now. I mean, every team, the Cardinals and Jets are very well aware of the fact that this is not a quarterback-heavy draft at the top. Maybe one other guy that's worth drafting in the first round in Ty Simpson. But the running back thing to me is almost more shocking, because the idea that you have 3 running backs in your top 100, especially when you're coming off the heels of last year, where we talked ad nauseum about how you could find a starter into the 3rd and 4th round, this just does feel like a very strange class at running back and quarterback specifically.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not even so going back to 1985, okay, that was the last time we saw single-digit quarterback and running back both together drafted in the top 100 picks. So it's been a long time since both of these positions were light, and this year we'll see if if we're able to get to double. If you combine the 2 positions drafted, if we can get to 10 or not. Right now, I only have 6 or 7 in my top 100 combined, and so we see quarterbacks overdrafted every year. Drew Aller from Penn State could be one of those guys that gets into the top 100 for a team that just wants to bet on a quarterback. Like Mike Washington from Arkansas, running back, has done a really nice job this pre-draft process. Wouldn't be surprised at all if he goes into, the 3rd round, for example, especially when, I think about the Seahawks, for example. Like, they only have, I think, 1 day 3 pick. So if they want a running back, they probably have to take him in, say, the 3rd round. And so maybe you're taking a guy around earlier than you normally would or want to, but that's just what they have to do. So draft circumstance will play out how these positions come off the board. But overall, yeah, it's just a it's a lighter position at both, and I don't know that there's a I don't know there's a true root cause for why. It's just how this draft has played out. And these things are cyclical. Last year was light at quarterback. We still saw, quite a few go into, as top 100 picks. But this year, I just don't think we have that Tyler Shuck where, at this time last year, like I felt like I had the champion for Tyler Shuck being a good quarterback. And, I think he's, we feel okay about the promise he showed, at least as a rookie, where, we'll see how year 2 goes. This year, I am having a hard time making one of those cases where, and Ty Simpson from Alabama would be the guy that is, if you're going to make it one of those arguments, he would be the player. And it's interesting, and I'm eager for you to watch him, Robert, just because it depends on the timeline and the chronological order of how you watch his games. Because back in my mid-season top 100, he was number 2 overall in that.
We're listening to you guys in October, and I was like, "Oh man, here we go. Let's get on the Ty Simpson train."
It was hard to talk about him without like, all right, let's not overdo this, because his September, first part of October was great. Georgia game, Vanderbilt, Wisconsin, like those tapes to show a NFL starter doing NFL level things. Where then you watch November and you watch some of the later season stuff, and it's like, okay, things are falling apart. He's not able to elevate an offense that is deficient in the run game. The offensive line was a mess, and he wasn't able to overcome that. And so some of those average physical traits became a little more amplified. And so I think with Ty Simpson, some teams are going to be a little more optimistic. Some teams are going to be out completely, not even think he's worth a second-round pick. So his draft projection is all over the place at this point.
So you had Tyler Shuck as your 50th overall prospect last year, I believe, in your final top 100. Do you think that Ty Simpson in last year's draft you would rank him as a better or worse prospect than Tyler Shuck?
First, I like Tyler Shuck as a prospect better than Ty Simpson.
I'll call myself out for the length of the draft process, because I was driving the Ty Simpson train up until like November, and then last 3 games of the regular season and the postseason, I was like, oh man, I got out over my skis here. But now that we're in mid-March and you're just going back and watching cut-ups and you can bounce around between 3 different games in 45 minutes.
You don't have to watch the bad movies. You can just watch the good ones.
Yeah, I'm like, there's a lot to like here if you can just sort of hand wave some things. But I think I'm a little more drawn to this quarterback class than I thought I would be, because I am a coward, and there are lower stakes now. Like Mendoza's going to go 1, that's fine. But like if Ty Simpson is a second-round pick, if Drew Aller is a 4th-round pick, if you could get Garrett Nussmeier late on Friday, I'm not saying that any of these guys are going to have amazing NFL careers, but like those are low stakes picks with some real upside, in my opinion, and those are my favorite sorts of decisions to make. So,
in your opinion, what are the percent chances a non-Mendoza quarterback becomes a legitimate starter in the league from this draft class?
I wouldn't say good. I definitely I could see Nuss being like a very capable backup with like some spot starter ability,
Sure,
and and having a pretty good NFL career because of it. Ty Simpson's probably the only guy that I would be willing to say I could see having like a legitimate career as a starter, but like so much of that is just projection because we've only seen 15 games. But
that's the thing. 15 starts. That's
but
tough.
the good whips ass. Like the good's really good. And so if he were to get into the right situation at the right price too, like I'm into that. And like I said, I think that's mainly because you're drafting a guy with some very real potential without using a huge pick, because like I don't think I would draft Ty Simpson in the 1st round. I guess somebody might, but if you could get him in the 40s with a chance to grow into something over the course of his career and like not be a day 1 starter in the NFL, I'm still pretty into that. I'm not completely backing off the Ty Simpson train.
I think that's fair. I mean, a chance to, at that point in the draft, it feels like a worthy risk to take. Because you're right, there's a lot of good stuff on his tape. The lack of starts is a big big issue. Now, obviously, we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it's a more unique 15 starts because he grew up the son of a 20-year head coach at the FCS level, so he grew up in a college program. Like, he's just a little more advanced mentally than I think most quarterbacks who only have 15 starts. And so it's just a really unique situation for him. But we just don't have a track record of a quarterback with so few starts going into the NFL and really finding success over the last 10 years. The closest thing is like Mac Jones, just obviously the Alabama connection. He had, I think, 17 starts when he was drafted. And he's a backup and fringe NFL starter. So yeah, I think that with Ty, he's a unique player that I wouldn't be willing to take in the first round. But yeah, once we get to the second round, then it's like, all right, this is a dart throw that for whether it's the Cardinals or whatever team might be, it makes a lot more sense.
We're coming off of a year, by the way, where there are a lot of two examples of, even if the general draft industrial complex doesn't believe this is an elite player, taking a dice roll on quarterback, the upside for it is so massive that you can talk yourself into it. That's exactly what Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck are. Like, no one was sold on Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck as like real answers at quarterback at the time that they were drafted. They were dice rolls. They were, you're taking a chance because the upside is massive. And I think both of those teams taking that chance, even with the Giants having to trade up a little bit, they're probably pretty happy with their choices. Like, what is waiting for you on the other side if it works out is so massive that I think it becomes a little bit easier to talk yourself into it. At the same time, we can go on the other way. The Steelers, I think, are still probably scared off because of the Kenny Pickett thing, the idea of taking a guy in that range of the draft. And so we've got examples on both sides that cut both ways.
Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, like those two guys in that draft, like, it is definitely, quarterback is such a complicated position to go through. And I think that we were hoping to see maybe Ty play at the Senior Bowl, and he was banged up, I know, so we didn't get that. He was fine at the combine. We'll see what he does at the pro day, but I think he's going to crush the interview process, and that'll help his chances. But overall, this quarterback class, we mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. He was a guy that had NFL starter grades coming into the year. Didn't play up to that level this year for LSU, but the injury was a big part of it. It was a core abdominal injury. How much is that a reason or is that an excuse? And so I think every team's going to look at that a little bit different. And then we get into the development guys or the backups. The backups are your Carson Becks, your Cade Klubniks, and then the development guys that at least you can see some upside. Those are the Drew Allers from Penn State, the Cole Paytons from North Dakota State. So it'll be interesting to see after the first two quarterbacks come off the board, and then even Nuss, when's that fourth quarterback come off the board? Does someone take a chance in the third round, or do we have to wait till day 3?
The running back part of this, just to kind of fill out the other side of like how free agency affected this a little bit and connecting the dots, like the idea that if Love's going to go in the top 5, that's why Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne get paid the way they do by teams picking in the back half of the top 10. And we also just saw, I think, a little bit more urgency to find veteran running backs to plug into your running back room in the first 10 days of free agency. The trade for David Montgomery, Rico Dowdle, Javonte Williams, and J.K. Dobbins both coming back to their teams. Kenny Gainwell. Washington has already signed 2 guys just in case, I assume that Jeremiyah Love doesn't get there. And so I think teams have shown a little bit of urgency in making sure they have answers there, because that idea of, well, we'll just find one in the 4th round is not something that's going to happen in this draft in the way it could in previous drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Saints and Chiefs making the moves they did was, to me, like in the moment, my first thought was, okay, they know Jeremiyah Love's not making it to 8 and 9 respectively. Now, I mean, you never say never. The draft is the draft, but I think the league believes Jeremiyah Love's going to go somewhere in the top 7. He's too good of a player, too good of a prospect, belongs in that Bijan Robinson type of category as a difference maker, both with his legs, but also what he can do in the passing game. So, I think I did a mock the last day of the combine, so 3 weeks ago, and if I had to do one today, I wouldn't change the top 5. It would still be Mendoza 1, Arvell Reese 2 to the Jets, The Cardinals taking Maui Noah, the right tackle from Miami, and then Jeremiyah Love going forward to the Titans because of the impact that he would make with Cam Ward and just the difference maker he could be as part of that offense. And part of that is where else are you going to find the difference makers if you're Tennessee, and especially at the running back position. This draft, it doesn't have those guys. Jadarian Price, the other Notre Dame running back, probably going to be that second running back drafted, most likely second round, maybe somewhere in the top 75. We've never seen two running backs from the same school go 1-2 off the board, so that'll be if that happens, that'll be history. And then when's that third running back come off the board? Is it Mike Washington? Is it Emmett Johnson, Nebraska? And how early does that happen? So, and there are some guys in rounds 4, rounds 5 that are interesting and can find a role and maybe even make some type of an impact as a rookie. But it's a harder bet to make because we're talking about them as day 3 picks for a reason, and whether they're limited in an area, third downs, or whatever the reason may be, there's something about them that I think is going to hold them back, at least initially in the league.
Dane, over under Friday night, 3 rounds are in the books. Over under 3.5 running backs off the board.
I'll take the over just because I think someone will squeeze one in there, another one in there. So I think maybe 4 go in there. Obviously, Notre Dame, and then I do think Mike Washington, man, the way this pre-draft process has gone. Did you see his 3 cone, by the way, Helman?
No, I haven't. But I was actually watching Keldrick Faulk tape a couple nights ago, and my eyes just kept going to Mike Washington just bowling people over. What was his 3 cone?
6'1", 223 pounds, and he was a 6'9", 3 cone. So, I mean, it's just checking the boxes. He was a 4.33 40 at the combine.
That feels like a top 100 pick to me.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's somebody I think will, and he's a great kid too. Like, he started at Buffalo, then went New Mexico State, and worked his way up, and played really well for a bad Arkansas team, but their offense had some juice. So I would take the slight over in that scenario, but I still don't think it's going to be 5, 6 running backs.
The Seattle Seahawks have the 96th pick in the 2026 NFL draft.
Pencil it in.
All right, Dan, this next one is music to my ears. It's a team that cannot rush the passer and has 3 picks in the top 60. But according to you, this is a good year to be collecting edge rushers. You have 6 guys between 29 and 54 in your top 100. So, I mean, that's just the fact that area of the draft, that like late first into the second, is filled with all these guys. And I think one of the coolest connection points you can make is look at Seattle and where they found their edge rushers. Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, both second-round picks. Uchenna Nwosu was originally a second-round pick. And so the pool of players available in this draft kind of falling in line with the way the best teams in the league have been building over the last couple of years. Something to keep in mind as we start digging into this thing.
We're going to see probably 3 pass rushers come off the board in the top 15, maybe even the top 10. Arvell Reese, David Bailey, Ruben Bain. And then it gets interesting to see what the order is going to be as they come off the board in the back half of round 1 and then rounds 2, rounds 3. Because it's, pick your flavor. It's what type of pass rusher are you looking for? Are you looking for the linear explosive guy? You're looking for more someone that plays with power, someone that can rush down the middle, someone with versatility, upside. So it really just depends on the type of pass rusher you want. And that'll depend if you're going to be a R. Mason Thomas guy from Oklahoma or a Zion Young guy from Missouri. And so that more so than talent level is going to impact the order these guys come off the board. But I think they're all going to come off the board pretty early. I think I had 16 of them in my top 100, and there's a case to be made for a few others that should have been in there as well. So we're going to see these guys fly off the board pretty quickly. And you point to the last 2 Super Bowl winners, the Eagles, the Seahawks. The pass rush was such a big part off the edge with what they wanted to do, staying fresh, keeping a steady rotation of those guys. So collecting edge rushers is going to be a common theme, I think, in a top 100.
What's interesting to me, and again, I think a lot of these guys typically fall outside of the range I'm about to talk about, but it still jumped out to me. even if the flavors are a little bit different and the skill sets are a little bit different, there aren't a lot of small guys in your top 65. Like all the edge rushers that you have in your top 65, I don't think a single one weighs less than 250 pounds. And even that is the guy that you just mentioned from Oklahoma, who's
Or Mason
6'1".
Thomas.
And so that, I mean, that's when you think about the frame. I mean, that's still like a thick dude. And so, and a lot of those DPR guys that fall under that are your 235, 240 pound guys, those guys often do fall further into like the third round. But the idea that you really have none of those players and it's all these bigger bodied guys in your top 65, I thought that was interesting. Like there's really no undersized, bendy speed guys as part of this discussion.
Well, and that's why Texas Tech fans asking me why Romello Height is not higher in the top 100. It's because he's 235, 237 pounds. That's how he plays, and that's fine. There's a room for you in the NFL, but you're probably not going to go in the top 60, top 75 picks because of that, because you're going to be more of a role player in whatever team drafts you. But no, I think that's a fair point. All these guys. But there's also a reason we're talking about some of these guys as second-round picks, early third-round picks. There's holes in part of their games, and so I think that'll be interesting to see how teams factor that in. A guy like Cassius Howell from Texas A&M, where does he fall compared to a guy like Malachi Lawrence from UCF? Like two guys that can get to the quarterback, but they do it in slightly different ways. And one did it at UCF, one did it at Texas A&M. And so I think it's a really fascinating conversation when you try to stack these guys. And I think you can the two smartest scouts in the world when it comes to scouting pass rushers could have two very different stacks when we look at this group as a whole. I think one of the most intriguing edge rushers is someone that Dave mentioned earlier, Keldrick Faulk from Auburn, who is in that Michael Williams mold where he's the youngest player in the draft. He's big. He's a former top recruit. He's, he if you watch his highlights, if you see the best stuff that he does, you see the ability to rush the passer. He's not overly twitchy and like that's just not his game, but he can win with power, speed to power. The way he was utilized, a lot of inside the tackle where he's not asked to rush the passer. We had this conversation last year with Shamar Stewart and the ways he was asked to play. So he's just a really talented player. But a lot of differing opinions around the league. Should he be the 15th pick or should he be the 35th pick? There's just a lot of differing opinions about Faulk.
I think I love this. I really love this edge class. And that's not to say that they're all great or that they're all going to be great, but it's just such a buyer's market of body types and rusher types and the way that you can try to fill this thing out. And I know you can get in trouble trying to extrapolate too many lessons from the team that just won the Super Bowl. But I remember we talked about this on a show with Derek recently, Robert, where like you need like ideally, I mean, at least 5, if not like 8 of these guys like the Seahawks have. And so I've come to a place where I'm just like, okay, can this guy fit into the puzzle? Can he be a piece of this for me and fill a role? And it's so tempting to be on the lookout for that Micah Parsons twitchy freak who can get you 12 plus sacks in a season, or ideally even more than that. And yes, that is the ideal. But again, in a year where those guys don't really exist, I am enjoying the challenge of trying to find guys that can fill certain roles for me. And they're littered all over the place, depending on the type of scheme that you run or the type of player that you're looking for. There are so many guys that are worth getting excited about. I mean, let's just keep talking about him, Dan, because it's Keldrick Faulk seems like everybody hates Keldrick Faulk. Nobody likes this guy. And if you were drafting him in the top 10, I understand those concerns. But with each pick after that, like starting probably in the late teens and then getting all the way down into the second round, between the frame, the age, what you see on tape as like a run defender and what you hope he could grow into, if this guy is just a big badass run defender who can grow into being some piece of your pass rush, that's pretty exciting to me. And so I feel like I enjoy the challenge of trying to figure out how these guys fit. I think the fact that I know I'm not looking for that freaky 16 sack edge rusher, it makes this process a little more fun for me. Like I'm really enjoying watching these guys.
And Faulk is a high character type of guy too. Like the quotes I get from Auburn are just like, all right, give me something bad. Like this is sounds too good to be true. Like he gave part of his NIL earnings to help a walk-on teammate. Like like I said, he's the youngest player in this draft, but he was also the most vocal leader on that team. Like, so there's a lot of things I like about him. But I want to go even beyond the top 100. Because I think I have over 30 draftable grades on edge rushers this year. It's just a loaded group. And so even at 4th round, 5th round, there's going to be some complementary pieces that I think are going to help round out rosters and, give you something off the bench. So some of them are more high upside dart throws. Others are, high floor, just not going to be more than a role player, but still give you valuable snaps. Like that's something that's going to be valuable in this draft. So top 100 strong at the position, but also on day 3, we're going to see some pretty solid edge rushers come off the board.
Dave mentioned saying puzzle pieces and using that as like a visual to think about this, I think is good, because if the guy's like a little bit warped and weird looking and doesn't give you like perfect edges, but he fits together with the other pieces that you have, that it matters less, And so again, we can get a little bit too reactionary when it comes to looking at the team that just did this. But when you look at what Seattle is, and I don't think that they're the only example, like I think about how the Rams have built their front over the last 2 years. I think there's plenty of teams where you can just see the way they think about the different pieces and the way they think about the individual skill sets among that group, and not how they exist in isolation, but how they exist in tandem with the other players that they have. I think that's a smart way to think about building your defensive front. And by all accounts, with what you guys are saying, this is the type of year to have that sort of mindset when thinking about the prospects.
I don't want to hear that you're not interested in a guy because he might not ever be a 10+ sack player with any regularity. Like that's so boring to me. And
give me 6 sacks in the Super Bowl. I don't give a shit.
Dane, you've talked about this guy plenty. We talked about him on the show. I spent some time this week going back and watching Gabe Jacas out of Illinois. Tell me you don't want that guy on your team. Like, the motor is insane. He plays with such a violent demeanor, and there's definitely stuff you can work with there too. Like, it's not to say he could grow into way more than you think, but even if like the baseline is relatively low, just as like a motor guy, I love it. I love watching the demeanor that guy plays with. And if you tell me that he's only a 5 or 6 sack player, I don't give a shit. Like, I bet you he could be a really productive piece of a good pass rush.
Gabe Jacas will be this year's version of like a Nick Scorton, that type of pass rusher.
Good player.
Where, yeah, a solid player as a rookie, and then by year 2, you hope he's a good player, and then see where it goes from there. But yeah, Jacas, I mean, the way he can marry his feet with his hands, with his eyes, he holds up in the run game, violent use of hands. He's a workaholic. So all the character feedback is high on him. 4-year starter, former wrestler. So yeah, there's a lot of things that kind of check the box. And like I said, even on day 3, a guy like Caden Curry from Ohio State, who was a big part of that Buckeyes defense this year, who doesn't get mentioned nearly as much as the other guys, but someone's going to draft him in the 4th round, and he's going to end up being a pretty valuable role player for whoever takes him. So yeah, we could spend a lot of time just talking about this edge class.
I mean, the couple of guys we did not mention by name: Akeem Mesidor is your 19th overall player from Miami. TJ Parker is your 36th overall player from Clemson. And so a lot of guys to be thinking about. Again, if you happen to root for a team who has 3 picks between picks 28 and 60, you might be paying attention to the edge guys. And the last point about this, you also have 5 defensive tackles going between 24 and 60 in your top, or that you have in your top 100. So we could have up to 20% of the total picks in the first 2 rounds be used on defensive linemen, which feels like a notable thing to think about as we get a little bit closer to the draft. Let's keep rolling through these positions. The wide receiver class, also a ton of depth. You said you could make a case for 20 of them, Dane, in your top 100. And we're really talking about different flavors and body types here. I mean, let's just stick to the guys at the top of the draft with this discussion. You got Carnell Tate, Jordyn Tyson, and Makai Lemon are your top 3 receivers in this draft. I mean, Tyson and Makai Lemon potentially going in the same range of the draft. If you look at who they are, what they're bringing to the table, I mean, this is all going to be about what type of player you want. Again, not in a vacuum, but how that skill set fits your offense.
Right. And I remember texting you in October, and I rarely do this because I know you don't care about.
Do care? I hate you say I don't care. I
not in
definitely
October.
care.
You don't care in October, but like because your focus is on on the NFL and not necessarily what might be coming down the pike. But I don't know why. I think you guys were just talking about something on the show, and it made me think.
It was the idea of how like inside out versatility and like
okay,
players. We did a show about essentially how Puka, JSN, guys like that were reshaping the way that we think about elite wide receivers in the NFL, what it means to be an elite wide receiver in the NFL.
And that's where Makai Lemon might fit in that category because of how dynamic he is inside outside. And he might only be a 4.5 athlete, and that's what the quote unquote official 40 time was 4.50. But he is so good. It's the Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it's a very. I think some people are going to be a little too high on him because they're going to overcompensate for missing on Amon-Ra St. Brown like we all did, while I think it's okay to be excited about when you watch Makai Lemon and you see how physical he is to the catch point and how good he is maximizing yards after catch. He's just a tough kid who is not going to blow you away with the physical traits, but receiver-specific traits, that's where, I just keep coming back to the Rams at 13 and, like, how much fun that would be to add him into that offense.
Out of here. We don't have to keep doing this.
Why not keep doing this? But
I would be so annoyed if I were a fan of another team, and every single time we have this discussion, whenever a cool player comes up, it's just like, let's just put him on the Rams.
The Rams or the Ravens. That's what we always seem to do. But look, this is a receiver class that doesn't have that. I think none of these receivers I have as high of a grade as I did McMillan last year. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, I still think there's quality receivers in this draft that can go top 15. Carnell Tate being wide receiver 1, Ohio State, who really came on this past year. He was a big-time vertical threat, but can also work underneath. He's a really good route runner. That was the biggest jump he made from 04 tape to 05 tape, was how detailed he is as a route runner, how more reliable he was in terms of the timing and the cadence and catching the football, an elite sideline guy as well. So I think with Tate, a team like the Browns at 6, maybe I don't think the Titans would go that direction, especially after free agency. But I think teams in the top 7, include the Commanders in there as well. You can make the argument that Carnell Tate is the best option for us at this point. So I think he's going to come off the board quickly. And then we mentioned Makai Lemon. Jordyn Tyson's a little bit more difficult because of the durability factor, all the injuries he's been working through, and even into this draft process. It was a hamstring that bothered him throughout the year, and then it's kind of spiked a little bit during training. He wasn't able to work out at the combine. He's not going to work out at the pro day. There's a hope he can maybe run some routes before the draft, but we'll find out about that as we get closer. And so he's a guy that has missed a lot of time over his 4 years in college, and it's hard to understand how much to factor that in. But based just on the tape, to me, I see a guy like Stephon Diggs who can create his own separation. He can win at the catch point. There's just a lot to like about him. And so these are 3 really good receivers at the top. And then I don't think it stops there because Omar Cooper Jr. is right there after them. Mentioned Denzel Boston from Washington. So, yeah, this is a good receiver class where we're going to see 6 or 7 go probably in that first round.
I was looking at just this year compared to last year, and the first point I wanted to hit is, but there's probably no T-Mac in this group, right? And that's exactly what you just said. And so you had 13 went in the top 100 last year, 13 receivers. You have 20 in your top 100 this year. So what I wanted to ask you, if we remove the T-Mac part of this conversation, you had Matthew Golden, I think, as your 15th player in last year's draft. Do you think, as you're thinking about those 20 guys in the top 100, do you think the bigger cluster is closer to the Matthew Golden side of things, or do you think it's closer to the Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins range last year for you, which was your 45th player?
I would say Golden. I mean, the Golden
Okay.
Ibuka, like, yeah, I think that's
pretty good then. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
says a lot about this group if we have a ton of them and they're shading closer to that direction.
right. Exactly. And it's not to say that like this is we were just maybe spoiled a little bit when we had, the Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze all go top 10. Like, it seemed like every year we had some guys at the top. Last year with McMillan, it seems like this year it's just like, okay, who's that next top 10 receiver where we don't necessarily have a no-brainer that should go that high. But there's still, yes, absolutely, quality receivers that should come in and make an impact early on. And like I said, it's not just those first three guys. Omar Cooper Jr. is right there. Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M, he just had a knee scope, and so we'll see how much that affects where he's drafted. But he's a dynamic player who is, needs to clean up some of the drops, but he's explosive with the ball in his hands. So this is a receiver class that even into rounds 2 and 3, there's really quality players that can give you something different based on if you want an outside guy, a slot guy, someone with more return experience. Like there's just a little bit of something for everybody with all these wide receiver needs around the league.
The theme for this draft really is it's okay to just be good, because that's like justice for just good football players. I don't know if any of these guys are special, but I am in the process of going back and revisiting some of these guys, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't see the problem. These are good football players.
Dave, give me an example of one of those receivers outside like those guys we mentioned that kind of fits that bill for you.
Okay, I'll give you. I have to bring this guy up. I know it's a bit for me, and we already did it. I just want to say I'll plant my flag and say I don't buy the hate on Boston at all. Like I do not see him. And I know he didn't run a 40. I know people are worried about his speed and his separation. I see it when I watch him. Like I think he's just fine for a guy his size. His hands are so awesome, and I don't view him as like a plodding player. I just don't. I like having gone back and watched him. So I think the hate on him is overstated. I don't know what that means for where he'll get drafted, but I'm comfortable with his movement and separation. And then another guy I wanted to highlight is a guy that you're a big fan of, who I think this outlines my point perfectly. He's 6'1". He runs just under a 4.5. There is nothing overly special on paper about Germie Bernard. Jesus, you know these guys by their measurements, you sick man. Germie Bernard's just a good freaking football player, dude. Like, just go watch him play. I love how smooth he is. I love how effortlessly he kind of changes direction. He's very, he just glides with the ball in his hand. Yeah, he's just a good, useful football player. And I don't think that gets people excited, but if he gets drafted midway through the second round, I don't think that would be terribly surprising, and I would probably be excited for the team that picked him.
In Dane's top 100, the first sentence about Germie Bernard is, at the risk of sounding obtuse, Bernard is just a good football player.
That's exactly it.
There's no trait that's going to jump out to you when you turn him on, like when you turn on his games, but he's just out there producing, looking like he knows what he's doing.
Let's get to the rest of these here, because I promised Dane that he'd get out of here in an hour. Let's stick with the pass catchers here. The tight ends this year. Dane, you have told everyone who will listen that you're running out of space for the amount of draftable tight ends that you have in this year's group.
Crazy.
You've got 5 in your top 100, but let's talk about what that means when you say, so lay out the actual facts of this, because you were tweeting about it the other day and I couldn't find the tweet. Essentially, how many draftable tight ends do you feel like you have? You seems like you're adding another one every time you watch somebody or every time you finish an evaluation on somebody.
I have a draftable grade on 25 tight ends and 5 more that are just fringe guys, where if I get depending on my situation, I could see them, I could see drafting them. So it's just a deep group, and a lot of these guys are not top 100 players. They're just useful players that it's like, okay, that will work in an NFL offense, whether it's because what they do in line, whether they what they can offer as a combo tight end. There's just a lot of different ways. Some of these guys it's more about upside. It's more about okay, they didn't show a ton in college, but you know what? I feel really good about these traits. And he was in an offense that didn't use the tight end very well. And there's more here. So, it's just a really deep group with a lot of names. And not all these guys are going to get drafted. There's just not enough spots on rosters for all 25 of these guys to get drafted, but they are draftable players. And it's just, I don't think I've ever had 25 draftable grades on a tight ends in any class I've ever done.
All right, so it's 25 total draftable grades. You have 5 in your top 100. Are we talking about the other 20 as like 5th, 6th round picks? Or are we talking about some of the other 20 and a chunk of them as like 4th round picks?
I would say it's probably half and half, like
Okay.
half in that 4th, 5th, the other half 6th, 7th. It's pretty evenly spread out.
It's a fascinating time for this to be happening just because, God, think about all the conversations, Dave, we had over the course of the season about how tight ends have just shaped the NFL over the last few years. And I think there's so many different reasons for that, right? It's just being able to dictate by personnel how important blocking tight ends are to what you want to do. I mean, this really was like a year of the tight end in the NFL. And so, Dane, the fact that that's dovetailing at the same time when we have 25 guys that you think are worth drafting, I wonder how coincidental that is. I wonder how causal that is. I wonder how much of that is the pipeline of players coming from college to the NFL. You hesitate to make like sweeping proclamations about any of this given in a 1 or 2 year sample size, but the fact that those two things are coming together at the same time is interesting, whatever the conclusions may be.
It really is. And I don't, there's probably a little bit of truth in all of what you said, but it's part of it is and a common theme that we have to remind ourselves and everybody is just, this is what the college game is giving us, right? This is just what this year is giving. And that goes for the top 10 of this draft. And it goes for a position like this that is super loaded on day 3, where you've got a Riley Nowakowski, where when you watch Fernando Mendoza and when you watch his tape this year, you will not be able to watch it without noticing Nowakowski at tight end and how impactful he was as a blocker and then as a kind of that safety net for the quarterback. You throw on BYU when you watch Carson Ryan, who was a combine snub, but this guy is going to go, he needs to be drafted because he's a good player. So up and down this tight end class, there are, whether it's because what they offer in the passing game as a blocker, both, there's something to them that's, I think teams are going to look at and say, all right, this can be our third tight end. And is it a Jackson Hawes type of reaction? Maybe for some, I don't, but I think it's just a good tight end class.
I just love the juxtaposition of most people view this as an underwhelming draft. And I just know evaluators and coaches are so excited about the number of like day 3 tight ends where they're like, oh my God, this guy can play on 3 special teams units, and in a perfect world, he can unlock our 12 personnel and we can do 21 with him doing this, or 22, like whatever, like he can do 6 different things for us, and he might only touch the football 4 times in his rookie season, but they're just going to be so excited to add him to their football team.
And the counterbalance to this is that as we have all these tight ends, we're going to need safeties to worry about all these tight ends. And you have 7 safeties in your top 100, Dane.
It's a good safety group, and it does stretch into day 3. And these guys are a little more specialized, or each one has their own specific set of strengths, and that's going to one it's like a guy like Genesis Smith from Arizona will be a 3rd rounder for one team and off the board for another, just because he doesn't really fit the exact type of safety that they're looking for. So it's a little more of a specialized group, but there's a lot of them. And I think for the right fit, the right situation, teams can upgrade what they're looking at with their safety position.
Just out of curiosity, Genesis Smith is your 72nd player. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys between 23 and 70. How many starting safeties do you think are available in the first 2 days of the draft?
I wonder where this question is.
I'm just curious.
From. Yeah, I mean, we're probably looking at 6 or 7.
Okay, great.
I mean, Chicago could use one of these guys maybe in the 2nd round. I think. Well, yeah, I think in my mock, I had them taking, I believe AJ Halsey from Dave's school down there at LSU. There's a lot of Kevin Byard there, so I think that was a potential fit. But yeah, we mentioned Caleb Downs, but we have to mention Dillon Thieneman and McNeil Warren from Toledo, who are two more safeties that likely go in the first round and are just really fun players to watch with how they can impact the game. And so it'll be interesting after Caleb Downs when those next two guys come off the board.
Which I know I'm putting you on the spot, Dane, but we do this every year. Like Dillon Thieneman lit the combine on fire. We talked about it plenty. It's easy to sit here and say, "Oh, he ran his way out of Chicago's draft range." Do you think that's actually true? Or again, I mean, like it or not, positional value comes into play. Like, do you think he's definitely a top 24 pick, I guess?
He was 23 on Dane's board before the combine even happened.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and that's my point. I mean, I think a lot of people expect him to be like 18, picked 18th or better at this point.
I think the draft range for him is probably 12 to 26, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, like if the Cowboys want, well, I mean, I guess maybe some of the free agency moves they made, maybe they don't go that direction at 12. But I think that's where we start to talk about him is in the teens, where we could see Thieneman realistically come on off the board. So yeah, I wouldn't come away saying, yeah, he's definitely going top 18 or top 20. So especially the safety position. Brian Branch was like my 16th player in that draft, and I didn't think there's any way he would fall out of the first round. He fell to like the mid to late second, and so
still dumb to this day.
Weird, I know. So I when it comes to the safety position, I'll never really feel good about putting a cap on. I don't see him falling past X pick.
Last position to get through here, just very quickly. You said you could see more offensive linemen drafted in the first round than any other group, but it's a flawed class as you even get into the back half of the first round for those tackles, and there's a huge fall off after the first round. By a flawed class, I mean, this may be a multifaceted answer. Are we talking about guys who are toolsy but raw? Are we talking about guys who might be solid but are a little bit limited athletically? Like, where are those flaws rooted in this offensive tackle class, even if a bunch of them might be drafted in the first round, in your opinion?
I think guys that, for example, I think the top two tackles, Francis Maui-Noah from Miami, Spencer Fano from Utah, they're both college right tackles who some teams have on the board as guards and it's not because they can't stay outside. It's more if we're going to really maximize what they could be as pro players, let's move them inside and just let them flourish. And different teams think differently about that. Some are very steadfast on let's let them fail outside at tackle. But like Spencer Fano, to me, he might be the biggest wild card in this draft because his arms came in at 32 1/8 at the combine. And it's going to be fascinating to see what the arm length is at the pro day, because if it comes closer to 33, then all of a sudden we're talking more about him as a tackle for some teams. And there's a lot of teams in that top 15 that could use an upgrade on the offensive line, but these guys are not your Joe Alt, the prototypical left tackle. And I think about Cleveland when we talk about this conversation. The additions they've made on the offensive line, they still are missing that left tackle. And I think ideally that's what they would fill at that 6th pick, but is the right guy there for them? And, Monroe Freeling from Georgia is a really toolsy player. Like the Colton Miller comps make sense for him, but it just feels like a reach to take him as early as 6. But if you're thinking long-term enough and you really like the tools, okay, you know what? Roll the dice. But it still feels like a huge projection at that point. Caden Proctor from Alabama is just an unbelievable physical specimen. 360 pounds. He jumped over 32 inches in the vert. Like just rare explosion. But why aren't you a more consistent football player? Do we need to move you inside to guard just to keep you from being stressed out in space? Then you have Caleb Lomu from Utah, who was the left tackle when Fano was at right tackle, but he's more of that Monroe Freeling level in terms of just needs to get stronger, needs to develop more. Like he's just not quite ready to face NFL pass rushers. So all these guys, there's something about them that gives you pause, more so than ideally you would want when you're talking about drafting them in the first round. but I think they're all going to go. I mean, I think all 7 are probably going to go in the first round, and then there's a big drop off after those 7. When I say those 7, I'm talking about Maui Noah, Fano, Freeling, Proctor, Lomu, Blake Miller, and then Max Ianhiachor from Arizona State. So these guys are all project as starters, but there's something about their profile that gives you a little bit of pause about taking them in the first round.
Hey, Dane, real quick, because we have literally breaking news about this subject. Mike Garofolo saying that Spencer Fano got up to 32 7/8 inches at Utah Pro Day.
There we go.
That's all the difference in the world, baby.
Well, this happened last year with Will Campbell, where the combine was shorter arms, goes to the pro day, and it's longer. Now, the one thing with Fano that I felt okay about with that arm length was his wingspan was over 80 inches. It was 3 inches longer than what Will Campbell's was last year. His was just over 77 inches. And you could argue that wingspan's more important than just strictly arm length when we talk about offensive tackles. So, look, Spencer Fano had the best workout of all the offensive linemen at the combine. The movement skills, just his ability to move in space and hit the bags, all that stuff. All the feedback from scouts was just glowing about this kid. The interview process was awesome. So there are teams in the top 15 just looking for a reason to take this guy, and coming in close to 33 inches with the arm length will certainly help.
All right. Hopefully, my education about this draft class is helpful for the rest of you as we fully dig into this. We've got a full month of draft shows coming your way, starting today, really, really digging into it next week. Very much looking forward to how the next month is going to go, all the way up to our live draft show, which we are doing again, blowing it out. It's going to be great. For now, that is all we got. Sincerely appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you very soon. Thanks for watching. Follow the Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.